Hi there, I'm Holly Carr with the U.S. Department of Energy. I'd like to welcome you all to the November installment of the Better Buildings webinar series. In this series, we profile the best practices of Better Buildings Challenge partners, Better Buildings Alliance members, Better Buildings Better Plants partners, and aligned organizations who are working to improve energy efficiency in buildings. Energy efficiency efforts are typically either technology-based, such as installing variable frequency drives or high-efficiency lighting, or behavior-based. And today we're going to turn our attention to the behavior side of the energy efficiency coin to look at how competition can spur energy savings within organizations. We'll hear stories from the city of El Paso, where competitions among city firehouses and libraries have contributed toward the city's Better Buildings Challenge goal of 20% energy use reduction by 2020. Next, we'll hear from Better Buildings Better Plants partner, Legrand, about their Power Down Day, which engages staff across the company and has inspired dramatic energy savings. And finally, we'll hear some great stories from our friends at EPA on best practices in energy efficiency competitions. Next slide, please. So here we have our agenda for the session. We'll start out with an introduction of our speakers, and then move right into their presentations detailing their corporate efforts in this area. And next we'll connect you with some resources our panelists have developed, which are available to you online and will also be available through the archived version of this presentation. And we'll finish up with a question and answer period open to our audience. Next slide. So our first speaker this afternoon will be Eloisa Portillo Morales. Eloisa is the Sustainability Program Engineer for the City of El Paso and is responsible for implementation of the City of El Paso's Sustainability Plan and Initiatives. She holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's in business management from the University of Texas in El Paso. Eloisa has been with the City of El Paso for almost 6 years and has broad experience in sustainability, including initiatives in energy, waste and recycling, transportation, green building, community gardens, and outreach. Eloisa leads the Green Business Challenge, Library and Fire Station Energy Savings Challenge, and supports city departments to achieve their sustainability goals. Next, we'll hear from Susan Rochford and Paul Canada, both of Legrand, North America. Susan is the Vice President of Energy Efficiency, Sustainability, and Public Policy for Legrand, North America. She is responsible for advancing Legrand's progress in setting and achieving sustainability goals and commitments as an organization and in the marketplace. She also spearheads the company's government affairs and policy initiatives. Rochford holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Connecticut and a Master of International Management from Thunderbird School of Global Management. And Paul Canada is the Director of Transportation and the Corporate Energy Manager for Legrand, North America. Paul joined Legrand in 2006 and is responsible for the North American Transportation Network and Customs Compliance sections. Paul took on the additional role of Corporate Energy Manager in August of 2007. In this role, Paul leads a corporate-wide effort to identify and implement initiatives to reduce the company's energy intensity and fulfill its responsibilities as a partner to the Department of Energy's Better Buildings, Better Plants Challenge. Paul holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Southern Connecticut State University and an MBA from the University of New Haven. And finally, last but not least, Mike Zatz is a manager with the U.S. EPA's Energy Star Commercial Buildings Program. In this role, Mr. Zatz oversees the development and implementation of activities aimed at improving energy efficiency of a wide variety of building types, including offices, K-12 schools, multifamily residences, retail stores, healthcare facilities, and hotels. Mr. Zatz is also responsible for oversight of Energy Star's Portfolio Manager energy benchmarking tool, which has been used by over 300,000 buildings across the U.S. to evaluate and track their energy use and water use. Mr. Zatz has an MS in Environmental Science and Policy from Johns Hopkins University and a BS in Engineering and Public Policy from Washington University in St. Louis. So thank you to all four of you for taking the time to present today and to share your success stories with our audience. We're looking forward to a great presentation. And without further ado, let's go ahead and hear from Eloisa with the City of El Paso.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name again is Eloisa Portillo Morales, and I'm the Sustainability Program Engineer for the City of El Paso. Next slide. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, we have these inter-organizational challenges, and I want to start with what kind of drove us to start these challenges. One, we have a sustainability plan that was adopted by our City Council in 2009 that has a energy reduction goal of 30% by 2014 from our 2007 baselines. And then we also joined the Better Buildings Challenge, and we have committed to reducing our energy by 20% by 2020 from 2009 baselines. And these are all organizational goals. Our approach to energy in general is this three-tier approach with the lowest conservation not costing anything, energy efficiency costing some, and the most costly is the renewable energy. So we have done some renewable energy projects. We've done some energy retrofits through a performance contract, and we really needed to start focusing on some conservation, so this is how we launched the Energy Challenge. Next slide, please. Our first year, the Library Energy Challenge in 2012, we had 12 libraries, and these 12 libraries during a 6-month energy reduction challenge reduced their energy over $21,000, and collectively about a little less than 10% of their energy was reduced during these 6 months. There were simple conservation efforts like setting computer power settings, turning off unnecessary lights, enforcing policies that they had already in the library, such as not having the study rooms be for less than 3 people, so they would reserve them and turn on the lights and have to have 3 people or more. So they started to enforce some of their policies. All the libraries were required to submit a plan to let us know how they were going to go about conserving energy. So they were required to go walk through their buildings and submit a plan on how they were going to reduce their energy. Next slide. We had some barriers, just like everyone will always, and some of our barriers were staff buy-in, the perceived public support or lack of, and energy data, the format that we were getting it in. The staff buy-in, they were a bit concerned. They weren't sure how much they could actually make an impact. So they were very afraid of how the public would also react to them enforcing policies that they hadn't enforced in many years, or they were inconsistent throughout libraries. And the energy data was, we still received the bills in a paper format, so we really needed to have it put in some sort of spreadsheet or software so that we could actually use it, be more user-friendly. So to help a lot of these barriers, we started putting some posters up in the libraries to help the library staff get the support from the public so that they knew what we were doing and why we were enforcing policies. The other thing we did is to kind of get the library staff engaged and excited. We gave them these tumblers, these water tumblers, so that they were very visible, and it was a constant reminder that they were in the challenge. Over the 6 months, we had monthly winners. And each monthly winner of the library would receive a lunch and a certificate, and they'd get some acknowledgement in our sustainability newsletter. The overall winner over the 6 months, the first place would won $500 towards their library, and there was a press event with elected officials like in the picture. And so that we did give them a lot of publicity and praise for all the efforts, because this was based strictly on staff efforts. Next slide. The challenge was really a huge success. No one expected the Library Energy Challenge to save that much, and we were hoping for a 10%, and we were pretty close on target, so that was a success to us. So we decided, let's go on to a bigger department. So we decided to go with the fire stations. And the fire stations, although we have almost 3 times as many facilities, their energy bills were not, they're about half of the 12 libraries. The Fire Station Energy Challenge we launched this year. It was also a 6-month energy challenge. The fire stations were able to reduce their energy by $8,000. About 87% of the fire stations actually reduced their energy consumption. We had 800 employees that we were reaching to or participating in the challenge, and they also had simple conservation efforts, but their conservation efforts were different. Because the libraries had a lot of computers and rooms, the fire stations are 24/7 live-in facilities, and their impact and their conservation efforts were a little different. They were also talking about lights, but thermostats and washing in cold, and because this is a place of where they're actually living 24/7. Next slide. We also had some barriers, of course, in the Fire Station Energy Challenge. We had a new leader. We had a lot of people that we were going to have to bring on board and have them buy into what we were doing. And the new chief, at the time he was the interim chief, and he was really trying to get a hold of the department. And I don't think that we could have engaged him a lot more. Looking back, that's one of the things that we would have improved. Staff buy-in also. This was a different set of mind. The fire stations, their goal is to save lives, and they are critical to our community. So it was very hard to get them to take into consideration. Let me make sure I turn off the lights on my way out to this, house burning down. So it was really hard to get them to actually change their thought process. We had half the budget for the Fire Station Energy Challenge due to just general cuts. And like I mentioned, we had 3 times the amount of facilities. So some of the things that we had to do, instead of being able to do these monthly winners, we started to do a Fire Station Energy Challenge newsletter. So that way we were able to reach out to all the fire stations, let them know how they were doing, and letting them know, about some of the other facilities. We have a couple of fire stations that have geothermal systems, so we wanted to kind of do a little education in the process. The Fire Station Energy Challenge also had monthly winners. In this particular case, since we did not have the budget to be able to provide them lunch, and we had over 800 fire station employees, we had to do monthly winners, and which allowed certificates, and we gave them a lot of publicity and recognition. The first place fire station also won $500 towards their fire station, and they are also having a press event with elected officials that should be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Overall, the Fire Station Energy Challenge reduced their energy about 7%, a little bit more than 7%. And when I looked at the actual numbers, 8,000 versus 21,000, there's a big difference there, but the truth is that when it comes down to the actual energy, they were not far behind the libraries, and the libraries' bills were a lot bigger. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned in our challenge is that we really need to engage the leaders. The library energy challenge, we had a director and a deputy director that had been in the position for at least a little while, and they were extremely engaged, and they participated on a monthly basis in everything that we were doing. They also, praised each library every month and came to the luncheons and celebrated with that library. So I definitely suggest, really getting the leaders involved and on a consistent basis, letting them know where you're at and what you're doing. Also, communicate early and often in various mediums. What I mean by that is make calls, do face-to-face visits. Don't just go and visit the winners and say, oh, you guys won, you guys are doing a great job. Find out what they're doing and then share those successes with other stations or other facilities. We also, like I mentioned, did newsletters. The newsletters were a great hit because we were able to get a lot of feedback, and they were able to get in some information. And one of the main things that I want to take away from this is that we need to engage low performers. What we noticed is that when we engaged low performers, we were able to identify what was affecting their actual performance, and if there was ways that we could help, we would. it also brings them back into the challenge. Sometimes they might give up at the beginning, which we had a couple that said, oh, we're never going to compete. And you have to make sure that they clearly understand the challenge and what it is that's required or being asked of them, and that usually will bring them back in. And this is pretty much it for the city of El Paso.
Great. Thank you so much, Eloisa. Some great examples there and some really great lessons learned to share. We appreciate it. As I mentioned, we will have time for questions at the end. We're already starting to get a pile of questions coming in from Eloisa's presentation, and we're taking those in, and we'll address those at the end of the session. So please continue to send those through the question box on your screen. And now I'd like to turn it over to Susan Rochford and Paul Canada, who are on deck to tell us about Legrand's Power Down Day. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. If you can just turn to the introductory slide. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Susan Rochford with Legrand, and Paul and I are very excited to be here today to be part of this webinar. I just want to give a little background to start off and kind of give some context to this, what we've characterized as the Power Down Day, and how we came to this idea of competition. It was probably about middle of 2012. We were looking for a way to engage employees across what, in the case of Legrand, is a very geographically disparate organization, different departments, different locations, different businesses, because we wanted to really underscore the importance of all of our employees and their role in meeting our energy goals. So we actually looked outside of our own company for some inspiration and ideas, and we came across a competitive concept that had been used very successfully in the higher education sector. And what it involved, from what we learned, was where universities or colleges' dormitories would basically compete against one another to see which dorm could use or reduce their energy consumption the most. So we thought that was a pretty interesting idea, and after some evaluation and adaptation and vetting the idea with our leadership, we found there was a lot of enthusiasm of adapting that to have a site versus site competition here in our own company, and organizing it around a one-day period. And so we called it Power Down Day. Before going into the details of that, which Paul's going to talk about, what I want to do is just offer a very brief introduction to Legrand, in case some of you on the phone have not heard of us, and explain how this employee competition fits into our energy management strategy, and very briefly how that energy management strategy fits into our sustainability strategy. And then Paul is going to give you sort of an overview of our program and how it's worked for us. So if you can turn to the next slide. So Legrand is a global company that designs and manufactures a very wide range of products and systems that protect, deliver, and control light, power, data, and audiovisual in residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. We're approaching about $6 billion in global revenue this year, about $1 billion of which is generated here in North America. We are actually speaking to you from West Hartford, Connecticut, which is our corporate headquarters here in North America. And we have over 2,500 employees distributed over 17 different locations, the majority of which are in the U.S., but also some in Mexico and Canada. And you might know some of our solutions and products by what are brand names known as Cablafil or Patent Seymour or Nuvo or Advantage or Wattstopper or WireMold. And you would come across our products in pretty much any commercial building you might be in. But you'd have to look at the ceilings, behind or on the walls, under or over the floors, or mounted in various corners, because our equipment, our network, and electrical distribution network is really sort of the backbone of the communications and power in buildings. Next slide, please. So we came, as I mentioned, to this notion of an employee competition, and the genesis of it was a commitment we made at the beginning of 2011, as the others on the call, to the Better Buildings, Better Plant Challenge. And as it happened, this commitment, to the Department of Energy and the program coincided with the beginning of what was a really concerted effort on our company's part to formally integrate sustainability into the way we do business. And I'd just like to note, if you can kind of see, looking at this wheel that's on the slide here, that our sustainability commitment is inclusive not only of environmental considerations, but also social issues relating to how we impact, our employees and the communities in which we operate. It's also inclusive of a strong commitment to uphold ethics and values and principles within our own organization, as well as to extend that expectation to our own suppliers. And in fact, we have, over the last year or so, begun to directly engage our suppliers on what we call our sustainability journey. And the Better Plants Challenge is actually a very key initiative within the environmental aspect of our sustainability commitment. And within that, as you can see with what at least on my slide looks like a yellow part of the wheel, our efforts to leverage sustainability to further improve our operational excellence as a company. So we made a specific commitment and accepted a specific challenge when we agreed to participate in the Better Plant Challenge. The commitment was to reduce our energy intensity by 25% within 10 years across 14 U.S. facilities. And as I said, we began this in 2011, and our baseline year was 2009. And I'm very proud to say that by the end of 2012, we had actually exceeded this goal, in fact, having achieved an energy intensity reduction of 29%. The challenge that we accepted was to cut energy intensity by 10% in just 2 years at what DOE characterizes as a showcase site. And in our case, we selected our headquarters here in West Hartford, which is actually a 100-year-old, well, parts of it anyway, being a 100-year-old building that is mixed use, constituting both a factory as well as the office space that houses our headquarters. And I'm very pleased to say that we're well on our way to meeting the challenge goal of 10% in 2 years. And on both counts, both the larger commitment and this challenge, our employees have played a really key role. Next slide, please. So not so long into our efforts to organize to determine how are we going to meet these goals, at the beginning of 2011, we came to realize that there was really no silver bullet that was going to get us across the goal line. Obviously, we understand, and many people think about efforts to save energy or become more energy efficient as relating to technology, which is very important, but we see as insufficient because, in fact, technologies don't deploy themselves, and they don't necessarily operate as expected unless you have really informed, educated, and involved employees that are interacting with them. So the support and engagement of our employees, we realized, is also critical, as was taking a fresh look at our processes, how we get things done in our company, and how the way that we do things actually impacts our energy use. So we have been pursuing what we characterize as a three-pronged strategy to meet our Better Building, Better Plant goals, which is engaging our people, evolving our processes, and deploying the right combination of technologies. Next slide, please. So with respect to engaging our people, for us, it truly begins at the top, including with a very visible and abiding commitment by our CEO, who was the one who made the personal commitment to the Secretary of Energy when we became involved in this program. And it is reinforced by designating specific individuals to drive energy initiatives across the organization. And my colleague Paul Canada, whom you'll hear from in a moment, as you heard at the beginning, he is Director of Corporate Transportation, but he is also our Corporate Energy Manager, and he has a network of site energy managers around the company. And it also involves multiple efforts and communications to educate and really inspire our employees to contribute to our efforts to save energy. And that's really where this competition, Power Down Day, fits in. So I'm now going to turn over to Paul, who can tell you a little bit about this story, and I'll stay on the line to participate or answer any questions later in the call.
Next slide, please. So the Power Down team had done some limited research for similar Power Down outcomes with reductions ranging from 7 to 15%. In one 24-hour period, Legrand achieved a 24% reduction in energy intensity. We were really blown away by this number and extremely pleased with the level of engagement and participation that occurred. There were 8 sites that recorded energy intensity reductions above 30%. In addition, we identified a multitude of everyday energy efficient opportunities, and employee participation was arguably higher than any other engagement activity we had previously undertaken. Next slide, please. So our employees had a lot of fun with Power Down Day, some taking competition to a whole new level. For example, microwaves, not allowing microwaves to be used at lunchtime, turning off TVs and monitors, that might be in break rooms or cafeterias. Most others contribute in more sustainable ways by turning down the heat a couple degrees and wearing a sweater to work, turning off overhead lights during the daytime, reducing unnecessary task lighting, or altering sensors to automatically turn lights off after 5 minutes instead of 15 minutes. Next slide, please. So the characteristics that allowed us to have such a successful Power Down Day were two things. First, being local participation at each site. We had 24 sites participating across North America, but only 19 of those were able to track their energy uses. We had 5 sites which consisted of rented or leased facilities where the energy was included in the rent, or the facility was a multi-tenant location and we couldn't isolate the Legrand usage. However, those sites were composed of some of the most enthusiastic employees snapping pictures of their energy-saving actions throughout the day. At each site, we identified 2 employees with important roles, the first being the communication liaison and the second being a site energy manager. The communication liaison was the person in charge of hanging up pre-generated Power Down Day posters. And on Power Down Day, the liaison was responsible for taking pictures of actions and handing out stickers that said, "I power down," to the employees that were involved. After Power Down Day was completed, we received over 150 pictures of Legrand employees taking action to reduce their energy use. With those pictures, we put together an animated slideshow that was viewable by all employees so they could see their contribution to the big picture across Legrand, North America. Next slide, please. The next characteristics of our success on Power Down Day was communication or promotion. So Power Down Day was intentionally planned out 2 months in advance by the Power Down Day team. We announced Power Down Day through our quarterly webcast that our CEO presents at, and it was a great opportunity to have a member of the executive staff endorse an employee engagement initiative and spark a sense of competition and excitement in employees. After the CEO's announcement, communication consisted of informing employees about Power Down Day, why we were doing it, how employees could help, what prizes they could receive by winning, asking employees for input, how are we going to go about saving energy, and distributing those ideas out to all employees. We also have 2 sets of employees, those with email and those without. So our communication venues included emails, posters pinned up on bulletin boards, TV monitors that are used for displaying announcements in break rooms and cafeterias were used. In all, we constructed 6 different messages throughout the 2 months prior to Power Down Day, and then we increased the frequency as we got closer to our November 1st Power Down Day. Next slide, please. The incentive for employee participation was threefold. The top 3 winning sites received catered lunches and money to donate to their local food bank charity of choice. The winning team also received a Power Down Day trophy that we had developed for bragging rights. Now, our original budget was only for the top winning site to receive a catered lunch, but when we advised our CEO of the results, he was so impressed that he decided to pad our budgets a little bit and award the lunch to the top 3 sites. The rationale for the food bank donation was that we conducted Power Down Day on November 1st and just before Thanksgiving season. And by narrowing down the charity, it also helped limit the worthy causes in our communities and make it easier for the sites to choose. Next slide, please. So Power Down Day was a successful event for Legrand, both in terms of operational savings as well as employee engagement. The outcomes we achieved were far more than the effort to manage all the logistics of such an event. And to help other organizations implement Power Down Day, our team has compiled some resources. They include some of our communications, the communication schedule, an energy tracking spreadsheet, and a volunteer tracking spreadsheet so others don't have to start from scratch. And you see the link on the screen. It's out there, and it's a free tool for anyone to use. And that's our story. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. This looks like a fantastic resource. I hope folks out in the audience are able to access it and take advantage of it. We have, again, lots of questions coming in for you, Paul and Susan, so hang tight, and we will get to questions right after we hear a little bit from Mike Zatz at the EPA. Mike.
Thanks. And I will try to be pretty quick here because I know how these go and know you have a lot of questions there. We only have till 4 o'clock, so I'm sure you'd like to get to all of them. So if we go to the next slide, I thought it would be good to actually take a quick step back and talk about really quickly why competitions are important and why they can be successful. And really, you know, our feeling here is that because to the average person, energy efficiency is actually really boring. Those of us who are speaking and those who are listening in, you guys all are interested in energy efficiency. It's something you probably do for either your entire career or a big part of it. So to us, it's not boring. But to the typical person, the tenant in a building, the employee of a company, it's not something they think about. It's not something they're very interested in. But unfortunately, we need them in order to make it work. So we found that competitions can actually make it exciting. And I found this great quote online that you can read for yourself, which was actually from the Renewable Energy Alaska Project. Energy Efficiency is Sexy photo contest. And they, of course, had photos that went along with that. I did decide not to put that into that presentation. But anyway, you get a sense of, you know, we're not alone in thinking this. You have to make energy efficiency exciting and interesting if you really want people to help you out and take it on. Next slide. So what we decided to do along those lines is something a little bit different than even the couple examples we've heard here today. And hopefully many of you have heard of this, but back in 2010, we actually launched our own competition, which is called the Battle of the Buildings, EPA's National Building Competition. Real quickly, what the idea was at the time, it really came up because of a popular TV show. And while we couldn't use the name, many people did equate the two and figured it out. But our competition was really based off the concept of the Biggest Loser TV show, which is still on air and going strong. But back in 2010, it was really, I think, at its height. And we had this idea that why don't we try to get everybody to compete and work off the energy waste? And that was sort of our tagline that we used. We were fortunate enough, even in this first edition of our competition, to have Bob Harper, one of the celebrity trainers from The Biggest Loser, be a spokesperson for the competition, which was really great and brought a lot of attention to it. So in the first year, what we did is we actually ran it just like the TV show. We put out a call for applications. We got over 250 buildings that applied to be in the competition, and it was essentially like a casting call. And from that, we selected 14 competitors who would compete head-to-head to see who could reduce energy use the most over a period of 12 months. This is the results of that. We came up with this sort of spaghetti graph here that really we loved. It really told a great picture, besides being very colorful and pretty. But you can really see what happened here. You can see that every competitor reduced energy use to some extent, some more than others. Some definitely had some increases in the middle, but then redoubled their efforts or caught some problem that was going on and ended up with a big reduction. But in total, those 14 competitors alone, this is only 14 buildings, in 1 year saved more than $950,000 and over 44 million kBTUs of energy. One that I wanted to point out in particular because it's a great poster child for a concept we like to promote here. Hopefully many of you are familiar with the Energy Star 1 to 100 score. And what that is it tells you how efficient you are compared to other buildings. And if you score 75 or higher, you can qualify as Energy Star. Well, we all know that a lot of people think that once they do a lot of work in their building and they become energy efficient, you know, they really can't do any more. And so people might say, well, my Energy Star score is a 90. I can't really improve very much. Well, I want to draw your attention to the bottom line on this graph. It's a Sears store in Glen Burnie, Maryland. They started the competition at an Energy Star score of a 92. So that means they're in the top 8% of retail stores across the country. And during the course of the competition, they still reduced energy use over 30% in their store in the period of 1 year and took their score up to something like a 97. So we really love that because it just shows that even if you're already a top performer, you can always improve more. Next slide. So that competition was so successful, we decided to do it again in 2011. But really our biggest problem was that all those 250 buildings that applied, only 14 got to participate, and the others were all very disappointed. So in the second year, we decided to change it up a little bit. We put out the call for applications, and this year, instead of selecting competitors, we let everybody who applied compete against each other. And the results here, again, the same kind of graph. You can see the same kinds of trends. And we had 245 competitors, and overall they saved over $5 million on their energy bills and 240 million kBTUs of energy. Very excited that the top 10 finishers, and those are the ones that we promoted the most, all saved over 30% during the course of the 1 year. This graph is the top 10. And 75 competitors out of the 245 saved 10% or more. Very interesting on this one. The winner threw us a little bit. We weren't really expecting it. Is the line all the way on the bottom, and it is a parking garage at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. We, of course, opened the competition to all types of buildings. We didn't really think about the fact that a parking garage might enter and win. But in the end, when we were thinking about it, we said, well, that's actually a great story, because it just goes to show that every building, literally, can work to improve energy and can achieve something. And so every building is important. So this competition was so successful in 2011, we said, boy, this is really great. People like it. How can we even expand beyond that? And if you go to the next slide, you can see the results of our 2012 competition. Yet again, we had to think of a way to build the excitement and freshen it up. So in this year, we simplified the application process. In the previous 2 years, you had to fill out an application form, write a little short narrative, and tell us some other information. So, that was a little bit of a lift, and so people really, only certain people would do it. So what we decided to do in 2012, because all of the data that was coming to us for all of these years of the competition was being submitted through our Portfolio Manager energy tracking tool, we decided to let people sign up online in Portfolio Manager, essentially, by sharing their data with us, and that would be the way that they entered the competition. They'd answer just a couple of other basic questions, but they wouldn't have to write a narrative or tell us really what they were planning to do. And really, the reason we did that is that we wanted to let more people compete and get more people excited and interested. So the result, it really worked. We had over 3,000 competitors in the competition that year, up from 250 the previous year. So we definitely garnered that interest. And they saved over $50 million over the course of 1 year, and enough energy to power to cover the electricity use of more than 43,000 homes for a year. The top 15 in this year are the ones highlighted on this graph. They all reduced more than 30%, and over 85 buildings reduced 20% or more. And very interesting, the last bullet, not all buildings, of course, saved energy. We saw that earlier on the fire station graphs and some of the others. Some did go up and get worse. But of all those that did reduce, on average, they saved 8% and $25,000. So we were pretty happy with that. And of course, one thing that happened in this year is that with 3,000 competitors, some were more interested and more involved than others, and that was to be expected. But overall, when you look at the total numbers, well over 250 that we had the year before really got actively involved and had great reductions. Next slide. So that's the quick highlights of the overview of those and the results. If you want to read more about it, we did produce a report in 2012 where you can read a wrap-up. It tells the stories of the winners and gives examples of what they've done and more details about the buildings themselves. You can go there and get this report at this website. And then the next slide will tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in 2013. We did, of course, continue the competition. Again, thinking of something new, we opened it up to tenants this time. We had a lot of interest, in particular from the commercial real estate sector, who wanted to do something, find a way to incentivize tenants to help them improve the buildings, because the tenants control a lot of the energy use. So we did open it up to tenants, and so we do have some tenants competing. And we, again, have over 3,200 buildings participating in the competition this year. It is still ongoing, and we'll be closing that at the end of the year and announcing the results in probably April. Next slide. So with that, I wanted to wrap up by just giving you a quick example of something a little bit different. We've heard our own competition looks at whole buildings, and that's pretty much what we've heard from the other presentations. What I also wanted to give you, though, is a great example of how you can run a competition even within a single building. We thought this was really exciting. L'Oreal, the cosmetic company, has their headquarters in New York City in Manhattan, and we learned from them that they actually conducted a floor-by-floor competition. They happened to be in a building where every floor was sub-metered for plug load and other loads that could be metered on that floor. And so L'Oreal wanted to incentivize people and encourage them to reduce energy use, the things that they could control. So they set up their own competition called I've Got the Power. And they followed these 4 steps, which we thought were really great. You first have to educate people about why this is important, why you're doing it, and how they can really help you accomplish your goals. Not enough to really just go to them and say, here's a competition, please do it. They really have to feel invested in and understand why it's important. Then you have to motivate them. That can be done in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways you do that is through recognition and through rewards. So this is the plan that they followed. If you go to the next slide, You can see a little bit of the things that they did and the collateral they came up with. Of course, the things you put on light switches, tip cards, and they used their Energy Star partnership also in here. Their graphics department designed a logo for the I've Got the Power competition. They had T-shirts, banners, little clings to put on monitors, all kinds of other things. And then, of course, the mystery checkers was the people who would walk around to offices and leave little Post-it notes about what you did wrong, like leaving your lights on when you weren't in your office. Next slide. So their competition was very successful, and really, if you look at the top right graphic here, you'll see their results. This was over a period of 6 months, and the winner reduced 37%, which was great. And interestingly, just like our Sears store in our competition that first year, you can see that their winner was already one of their floors that used the least amounts of energy, and they still reduced 37%. Next slide. So this was the summary of the results. On average, or in total, sorry, they reduced total electrical use by 9%. The winning floor, as I said, 37%. And total electrical costs went down $16,000. And keep in mind that that's pretty much just from plug load. You know, coffee makers, things like that, desk lamps. So while $16,000 may not seem like a whole lot, for what you're measuring, it actually is quite successful. And they then highlighted this in their Sustainable Development Report. And so I just wanted to present that to you because it's something, I think it really shows the breadth of how competitions can be effective. They can be done at the national level, like what we've done with the National Building Competition. They can be done within an organization among buildings in its own portfolio, or they can be done even within a single building. And we've had lots of other partners in Energy Star use this same model to pit tenants against each other within a single building more recently. So we're going to be highlighting some of those examples in some of our upcoming programs. And next slide. I think the wrap-up here, sorry, wanted to mention that once we launched our own national building competition, we went through a couple of years, we got so much interest from our partners who wanted to design and run their own competitions in one of those various ways I just mentioned, that we found ourselves answering the same question a lot of different times. So we went ahead and we put together our own guide to energy efficiency competitions. This is a guidebook. It's sort of a how-to, step-by-step guide to how to plan, design, and implement a competition. Of course, there's a lot of different ways to do it. So we give some examples, some recommendations, and we mostly highlight caveats and things to consider, such as if you want to have your competition end in December, go through December, and then you want to announce the winner in January, that's probably going to be pretty hard because people don't get their energy bills for December until the end of January or maybe even February. So you got to take things like that into account. So we give little helpful tips like that and other suggestions in this guide. And with that, I think that's my last slide. If we can go to the next one. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. And there's an answer to one of our questions from the audience for Mike, which is, please give a list of the most important pieces to a successful energy efficiency competition. And I think the competition guide is a fantastic resource coming from EPA. So I encourage folks who are thinking about doing these kinds of competitions in your own organizations to definitely take a look at that. Very good. And let's take a quick look at additional resources from our other two presenting organizations today. City of El Paso, hot off the presses, as a member of the Better Buildings Challenge, City of El Paso has developed an implementation model, which is really a case study and how-to guide for their energy savings challenge. So if this is something you're interested to try in your organization, the archive of this presentation will have a direct link to City of El Paso's Energy Savings Challenge how-to guide. So please do take a look at that. And Paul and Susan mentioned the Power Down Day Toolkit and all of the resources that they have made available to the public to avoid reinventing the wheel for all of you folks out there who might be interested to try this. There's also information about their Turn It Off Now campaign as well on the Better Buildings Challenge website, where Legrand has developed an implementation model or how-to guide as well. Let's move on now to question and answer session. There we go. Thank you. And so I have one question I want to start out with that has been asked by many, many of our participants. And I'd like for each of our panelists to take a stab at responding to this one based on your experience. And that is, Have you seen persistence of savings after these competitions? Do participants kind of slide back into old habits after the session, after the competition is over? And how have each of our panelists tried to combat that backsliding? So Eloisa, if you want to start out first with a response.
Sure. Actually, we just reviewed the Library Energy Challenge results this past year, where they didn't have a challenge in 2013. And let me go back and tell you that. So the Library Energy Challenge, the libraries overall reduced a little bit under 10%. The winner reduced their energy by 19%. And this year, they didn't have a challenge. And although they collectively reduced their energy by almost 10%, this year they reduced it 3.5%. So they actually reduced it from last year. So I think this kind of shows that a lot of these things do stick.
And so they reduced even more from the reduction point that they saw during the challenge?
Actually, yes. So during the challenge,
okay.
they were, you know, they had already reduced their energy by almost 10%. This year, they reduced it 3.5% based on last year's results.
Great. Fantastic. Susan and Paul, do you have any comments about sustained savings from your challenge?
This is Paul. Yes, we have. So we've seen an increase from where we ended up finishing 2012 to where we are in 2013. So I think a lot of the things our employees did on Power Down Day that were repeatable, we're seeing in action. And you kind of see more of an awareness as you walk around the buildings, and you see folks just, you know, walking in a room and turning something off that might have been left on, or, you know, using the need to get a new desk lamp. It's an LED fixture now, or something of that nature. So I think a lot of the things we did that day have stuck, and it certainly has helped with our overall intensity reduction across the company.
Great. And Mike, do you have any anecdotal experiences from the challenges that you presented? I know you don't have perhaps as much data accessible.
Right. That's exactly what we do have is anecdotal. We haven't tracked whether people have continued or not, in part because there's over 3,000 buildings participating in the last couple of years. But what I can say anecdotally, and I don't have the exact figures, is we have looked at and noticed that each year, from year to year, dozens or in this year, even hundreds of buildings are participating year after year. So it's not a guarantee that they've maintained those savings, but it's an indicator that they're finding the competition valuable, and they're signing up once again to help reduce energy use even more.
Great. We have another question that was directed to Paul and Susan. Wondering how much of the savings required capital investments versus low or no cost solutions and behavioral measures. So of the things that took place during Power Down Day, capital investments versus people making changes. Any sense of that?
Well, Power Down Day was strictly on the basis of personal employee efforts and decisions. Other than the free lunches and the community investments, which actually occurred like a month or so later, this was all strictly on the basis of individual decisions that our employees made to forego the use of lights in their office, or to unplug things, or to tape microwaves, or whatever the case might be. And that was the whole point. You know, the whole purpose of a one-day event was to make the point that employee actions can make a dramatic difference in how well we manage our energy.
Thank you. This is a question for Eloisa. So did you have any resources which you provided to the libraries or fire stations to assist them in reducing energy? Any specific suggestions that were made, or was it completely up to them to do whatever they wanted?
We definitely gave them some suggestions. We also gave them some materials like posters, which you will find on our implementation model website. And so there are some tools and resources that we have located there, copies of our newsletters. And we did constantly on our newsletters, we gave them tips on how they could reduce their energy. So if we identified something at one of the facilities that we actually went to go visit, because we did visit some of our low performers, and we would give them tips on how to improve, we would share those tips with everybody involved in the challenge.
Okay, thanks. And one other question for you, Eloisa, and this is probably relevant, well, maybe not so much to Susan and Paul since it was 24 hours, but the question is, how did the City of El Paso communicate competition standings to participants, and how did participants get updated standings? Was it once per week, once per day, in real time? And Mike, if you have any response to that one as well on the EPA program, that'd be great.
Well, for the city, as he mentioned in his presentation, you receive your bill about a month later, so you're always kind of behind in terms of how you're going to communicate to your staff. So we communicated by newsletter or by email, and we would graph out and rank the stations. Our challenge was also based off of the biggest loser, and so the stations or the libraries would actually see their energy use compared to the same time last year. And so we communicated by newsletter and monthly.
Yeah, and this is Mike. On ours, we communicated by emails, through some webinars, and then we actually have an entire public web page dedicated to the Battle of the Buildings, where if you go on there at any point, like now, you can see the progress in the current competition. And you can also see results from previous competitions. And so for the current competition, we have things on that homepage like an interactive map where we have a Google map with pins to all 3,000 plus buildings that are participating, and then you can click on each one and see their starting weight. And then once we have the midpoints, you can see how they're doing. We have downloadable lists of participants and all kinds of other things like that.
Okay, this is a question for Susan and Paul. What were people required to do if they couldn't measure energy use for their space directly? So you mentioned there were, I believe, 5 facilities that fell into that camp, and that were some of your most enthusiastic folks.
So all we asked them to do is the same thing they would do if the facility was able to be measured. So simply, again, even if it's a leased facility, turning the lights off if not being used, adjusting the temperature in the building. Even though we couldn't measure, we still wanted to make a contribution, have that site contribute. So we asked them to do the same thing they would do if we could measure the energy usage.
Okay, thank you. Mike, this is a question for you. So we had someone who was inquiring about the data that was submitted to you and how you were able to verify that accurate and honest data are being reported when you're not actually looking at utility bills as City of El Paso and Legrand are able to do, or do we just trust the goodness in folks?
That's a very, very good question. I'm glad somebody asked. And the answer differed by year, but in essence the answer is we did not verify it for all competitors. What we did do was for any that were that finished in the top 10 or the top 15, whatever we were promoting through our press releases and our main results avenues, we did require that all of those have their results verified by a licensed professional engineer using a process similar to what we do for the Energy Star certification. And so those were all verified. The others were not verified by us, and it's a good question. We thought hard about if we could do that or not, and just in the end, there really was no way to do it. But the other thing we thought was, the idea of this competition was not so much for us to then go out and claim credits and claim reductions. It was really to give people a platform for them to motivate action within their own buildings. And so, there wasn't really, other than if they really wanted to win, a great incentive for people to make up the numbers. People were also able to drop out if they didn't want the results being shown at the end of the competition, so they could always do that.
Thank you. I have another question here for Paul and Susan. Wondering if there's any concern at all that employees might make an association between conservation efficiency and too much personal sacrifice, and that people were putting on sweaters and not using microwaves and sort of sacrificing. Is there any sense that this could impact their perception of conservation in a negative way, and that their participation in self-directed conservation might be limited?
I don't think that that's the way we saw it or that our employees saw it. I mean, I can't, speak definitively because, maybe there might have been some residual perception that way. I think they really thought of it more for what it was, which was a challenge to, harness their own behavior and choices to make an impact. And, I think that, the message about how we can impact energy use is something that has, been working its way through our company for a number of years. In fact, one of our CEO's favorite expressions is the best way to save energy is to just turn the light off. It's a simple, sometimes it's the simpler things that can actually achieve the most results. And, we made it a one-day event to really give license to the employees, with the ground rule being you can't disrupt normal business operations, but we gave them license on that one day to get as creative as they could, to make this point. I think going forward, we wouldn't assume that, that they would take such extreme measures on an ongoing basis, and that it was really intended to be fun, creative, competitive, and to impress upon all of us, because frankly, going into it, we wouldn't have expected, as Paul said, that the impact maybe was going to be 5 to 12%, and we ended up with a 24% reduction. So I think they took it in that spirit.
Yeah, and who knows, you kind of give folks a chance to test the waters, and things that they thought were uncomfortable or would be uncomfortable perhaps were just fine. And so
there are more people working in without their, yeah, there are more people, I would say, working with natural light in their offices now than was the case before.
Okay, great. I'm going to send one quick question over to Eloisa before we close our question and answer period, and that's just a quick question on how the prizes were funded through the city.
The prizes were part of the sustainability budget. We do have some requirements on how they could spend that money, so it had to be towards their facilities. The libraries actually wanted to buy new carts and things like that to help them transport books. So they spent their $500 in library equipment. The fire stations haven't told us what they want to spend it on, but they were talking about energy efficient appliances. So all they had to do was actually spend it toward their facility. And like I mentioned, it came out of the sustainability budget.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. And I know we weren't able to get to all of the questions today. We tried hard to cover as much as we could. If you have questions that you really would like our panelists to respond to, feel free to go ahead and forward them to us at the email addresses you'll see in just a moment, and we can try to get some responses for you. We really appreciate all the great questions. And let's move on to the next slide. For our last few seconds here, I want to make sure to invite you to our December webinar, which will be focused on deep energy retrofits. We have a nice group of panelists, Kara Carmichael from Rocky Mountain Institute and Carlos Santamaria, one of our Better Buildings Alliance members, who will be joining us to talk about their experiences and best practices with deep energy retrofits in their building portfolio. You'll be able to register for that webinar immediately following this one. And let's head over to the next and probably last slide. Yes, so contact information for me, Holly Carr, as well as our Better Buildings Alliance lead, Kristen Chidonio. If you have any interest in more information on the Better Buildings Alliance or the Better Buildings Challenge, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. And to Andrew Schulte and Kate George with any additional questions on this session that we might be able to pass on to our presenters. It's 4 o'clock, and I'd like to thank our presenters today very, very much, to Eloisa, Susan, Paul, and Mike for your time and your thoughts on this topic. Very interesting case studies and perspectives on this, and hope it's inspired some of our audience members to try out some new things in the competition area. And this session, as I mentioned, will be archived. We will send out a note to you when that archive is available, and links to many resources to support your efforts in energy efficiency challenges will be available right through that archive. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll hope to see you next month. Bye.